The notification pinged at 11:42 p.m. on a Tuesday, glowing on the cracked screen of Chloe's old backup iPad. She had left it wedged between the couch cushions. I only grabbed it because it was vibrating against my thigh. It wasn't a text. It was an alert from an encrypted cloud storage app I didn't recognize saying, "Upload complete. 3 new audio files." I didn't have the passcode, but her thumbprint had failed a week ago, and she'd absent-mindedly typed in her childhood zip code in front of me. I punched it in. The app opened to a folder titled JNC. I tapped the most recent audio file. The unmistakable sound of rustling sheets hissed through the tiny speaker, followed by a low, breathless laugh. It was my older brother, Julian. "Mark is so clueless," Julian's voice purred, thick with a post-coital laziness I recognized from our shared apartment days in college. Chloe's voice chimed in, soft and familiar, yet entirely alien. "He's a good CFO, but a terrible husband. Did you get the trust documents?" My blood turned to Freon. I didn't throw the iPad. I didn't scream. I sat in the dark living room, the blue light washing over my face, and listened to 32 minutes of my wife and my brother dissecting my life, my finances, and my impending ruin. They weren't just having an affair. They were running a hostile takeover of my existence. When Chloe padded down the stairs 20 minutes later in her oversized sleep shirt, asking if I was coming to bed, I looked up and smiled. "Just finishing up some quarterly projections, babe," I said, my voice eerily steady. "I'll be up in 10. I watched her walk away, realizing the woman I'd loved for 6 years was a ghost, and the man I'd looked up to my entire life was a parasite. The urge to confront them, to burn the house down with my rage was a physical pressure in my chest. But anger is sloppy. Anger leaves evidence. If they wanted to play a corporate game with my life, I was going to give them a masterclass in hostile acquisitions. The next morning, I went to work and did exactly what I always did. I drank my black coffee, I reviewed the ledgers for the logistics firm where I served as chief financial officer, and I smiled at my assistant. But the moment my office door clicked shut, the real work began. I bought a burner laptop in cash on my lunch break. Over the next 3 weeks, I became a ghost in my own home. I installed a micro keylogger on Chloe's main laptop and hid a voice-activated recorder under the passenger seat of her SUV. I didn't need to know the graphic details of their physical betrayal. I needed to map the architecture of their financial plot. The pieces fell together with sickening precision. Our grandfather had left Julian and me a joint trust, locked behind a stipulation that it couldn't be liquidated without both signatures unless one of us was incapacitated or incarcerated. Julian, a charismatic but chronically broke real estate developer, had been pushing me to sign a restructuring agreement for months, claiming it would save us on capital gains. The keylogger revealed the truth. Julian and Chloe were working with a shady offshore attorney to drain the trust, nearly $4 million, the moment my signature hit the paper. But why would I sign? That was the missing piece. That was the twist that almost made me vomit into my office trash can. It happened on a Thursday. I was remotely mirroring Chloe's laptop while she was at a yoga retreat that GPS confirmed was actually Julian's downtown loft. She had left her email open. I watched her cursor move in real time as she drafted a message to an anonymous Proton Mail account. Attached were 3 PDF invoices. I recognized the formatting immediately. They were vendor invoices from my company, but the routing numbers were altered. I dug into my own company's secure server and found what they had done. Julian had somehow convinced Chloe to plant a hidden script on my home network. Whenever I logged in to work remotely, the script was quietly generating dummy invoices and routing company funds into a decentralized crypto wallet. They had been doing it for 3 months. They were framing me for corporate embezzlement. Their plan was flawless in its cruelty. They would trigger an anonymous tip to the SEC and my company's board. I would be audited, arrested, and facing federal time. With me locked up, Julian could invoke the incarceration clause of the trust, liquidate the $4 million, and vanish with my wife. I stared at the screen. a cold, crystalline calm washing over me. They had handed me the exact weapon I needed to destroy them. I didn't stop the embezzlement script. Instead, I quietly reprogrammed its destination. Using my root access as CFO, I let the fake invoices generate, but I altered the blockchain ledger they were using. I didn't route the money back to the company. I funneled it through a labyrinth of shell corporations I set up over a sleepless weekend. The final destination wasn't a crypto wallet they controlled. It was a domestic LLC registered under Julian's name, tied directly to his primary checking account, with Chloe listed as a silent partner. I made sure the IP addresses authorizing the transfers didn't originate from my home network anymore. I spoofed them to match the static IP of Julian's downtown loft. Then I went a step further. If you're going to frame someone, you don't just leave a digital trail, you leave a physical one. I took the burner laptop and drove to Julian's neighborhood while they were out at a business dinner. I parked 3 streets over, tapped into his unsecured guest Wi-Fi, and downloaded a massive cache of illegal, highly classified proprietary data from a rival logistics firm, leaving Julian's router MAC address plastered all over the rival company's firewall logs. I was building a nuclear bomb under their feet, and they were happily dancing on the detonator. For 2 months, I played the loving, stressed-out husband. I let Chloe massage my shoulders while I complained about the weird discrepancies at work. I let Julian buy me a beer and tell me I needed a vacation, maybe a permanent one, sliding the trust restructuring papers across the bar. "Just sign it, little brother," he said, clapping my shoulder. "Take the burden off." I signed it. I watched his eyes light up with predatory greed. He thought he had just won the lottery. He didn't know he had just signed his own death warrant. The climax arrived on the night of our 6th anniversary. Chloe insisted we host a small dinner party to celebrate. She invited Julian, of course. I knew why. The anonymous tip to the SEC and the FBI had been sent from Julian's loft 2 days prior. They were expecting the authorities to raid our house that very night to haul me away in handcuffs. The tension in the dining room was thick enough to choke on. Chloe was wearing the sapphire necklace I bought her for our 1st anniversary, pouring wine with a hand that trembled slightly. Julian was sitting at the head of my table, swirling his Pinot Noir, glancing at his Rolex every 5 minutes. They were waiting for the sirens. "To Mark and Chloe," Julian proposed, raising his glass, a smirk playing on his lips. 6 years, and to the future, whatever it may bring. "To the future," I echoed, taking a slow sip. I looked directly into Julian's eyes. "You know, Julian, I was looking over those trust documents you had me sign. I noticed a funny routing anomaly when the funds were released yesterday." Julian's smirk faltered. "Released? The bank said it would take a week to clear." "Usually, yes," I said casually, cutting a piece of steak. "But I expedited it, moved the whole $4 million. But I didn't put it in the offshore account you recommended. I moved it into a blind trust, irrevocable, managed by a firm in Zurich. It generates a nice annuity, but the principal is locked for 99 years. Neither of us can touch it." Chloe dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the fine china. "Mark, what are you talking about?" she whispered, the color draining from her face. "Just protecting our assets, honey." I smiled, though my eyes were dead. There's been a lot of corporate fraud in my industry lately. People embezzling funds, routing them into domestic LLCs. It's a mess. In fact, our internal auditors found a massive leak just this morning. Someone has been stealing millions from my company and funneling it directly into an LLC registered to Julian's home address. Julian stood up, his chair scraping violently against the hardwood. "What did you do?" he hissed, the mask of the loving brother entirely gone, replaced by a cornered animal. "Me? Nothing," I said, wiping my mouth with a linen napkin. "But the FBI seemed very interested in the IP logs showing the theft originated from your loft. And they were especially interested in the corporate espionage you apparently committed against our rival firm using your home Wi-Fi. That's federal wire fraud, Julian. Minimum 20 years. Heavy, urgent pounding echoed from the front door. FBI. Open the door, Chloe screamed, scrambling backward away from the table. Julian lunged across the mahogany, grabbing me by the collar. You set me up. I'll kill you. I didn't flinch. I just leaned in close to his ear, smelling the sour panic rolling off him. You shouldn't have laughed on the recording, Julian, I whispered. The front door splintered open with a deafening crash. A tactical team flooded the hallway, flashlights cutting through the dim dining room lighting. They didn't even look at me. They slammed Julian onto the dining table, shattering the wine glasses, zipping his hands behind his back. 2 other agents grabbed Chloe, reading her rights as a co-conspirator in the embezzlement scheme, her name forever tied to Julian's LLC. She looked back at me, tears streaming down her face, her eyes begging for a rescue she finally realized was never coming. Mark, tell them. Mark, please, she shrieked as they dragged her out the front door. I stood in the center of my ruined dining room, listening to the sirens fade into the distance. The house was finally quiet. I poured myself one last glass of wine, stepped over the shattered glass, and walked out to the back patio. The night air was cool and clean. I had lost my wife and my brother in a single breath, but as I looked up at the stars, feeling the weight of the last 6 years evaporate from my shoulders, I realized something profoundly liberating. Sometimes the only way to excise a cancer is to let it think it's eating you alive, right up until you cut it out entirely.